Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you so much for tuning in today. Today, I'm going to be talking with John Kumley, and him and I are going to be talking about something that's really important with your idea of securing your remote workers, and that's why you need zero trust. If you guys have a question or a comment during this live stream, you can leave it on whatever social media you're watching on, and we should get it here and be able to respond if you have a question. And we also really want to encourage you and appreciate it if you would hit that like button and then also share us on your social media. But before we get into the content, I want to introduce John. John, how's everything going today?
Everything is going well over here in Salem, Oregon. It's kind of warm, just starting to heat up a little bit. We're going to have a really hot week. It's exciting times over here.
Yikes. So you guys have been having that heat wave for like a month, right?
Pretty much. Honestly, Oregon has had some of the hottest temperatures, I think, on record. And this is going to be another one of those record weeks with the heat. It's crazy. I know you're over in Texas, so you've got heat over there, and it kind of feels like we're sharing temperatures.
Well, it's almost like we've flip-flopped. And I've been noticing on the weather, it looks like your high pressure is pushing your normal rain and stuff down across the south. So yeah, we've had a really mild summer. It's actually been pretty awesome. I don't even know that it's hit 100 degrees, except maybe like one time. So anyway, man, it's good to be here today. And today we're going to talk about with our audience. We're going to talk about something that's very important, and this is zero trust. And it may be a new concept. It may be something that you've never heard of before. But the whole idea behind zero trust is a very important aspect of securing your workers. So why do we need zero trust, John? What's the big deal?
Well, honestly, I think really with zero trust was originated by a guy named John Kindervag, and he just felt that the model of security was out of date. The traditional model was, hey, we can trust everyone as long as they're here. We know everyone is who they say they are. And he says that assumption is wrong, especially with people working from home and things like that. We need to know what the people are who they say they are. It can no longer be assumed that a user's identity is not compromised and that users can be trusted to do whatever we told them to do. They might download apps. They might do something they're not supposed to. And that kind of just, creates this need for to not trust users with everything. And that's where zero trust kind of came from.
Yeah. And it's kind of, I don't know, like classic old school security or IT was build a wall and keep out everybody, but maybe didn't handle if people got in the network. Also, it talked about, reducing your attack surface. And this whole idea of zero trust is more like defining the surface that you want to protect and then go about protecting it. It doesn't mean that like you throw out old security 100%, but at the same time, it's a better way to define what's going on and a better way for us as cybersecurity professionals to protect your stuff. So I think we're going to start off with the basic like assumptions of zero trust. Do you want to kind of explain what that is a little bit?
So with the zero trust model, I believe there's 3 pillars or assumptions that we need to do. There's a lot that we can say about this, but we've kind of combined it into 3. So, and the first one really is you need to verify explicitly. Now, what does that mean? We need to verify the person's identity. We need to know who the user is and make sure it's them. There's a number of ways we do that. There's 2-factor authentication. There's biometric fingerprints, things like that. We have to basically verify the person who they say they are, and more ways are coming to do that.
Right. And I think there's also an aspect of verifying other things involved, like, and I know we're going to get into this in a little bit, but other things involved, like, you know, the specific device, the specific application. It's just this whole idea of, you know, you're not just going to assume that something that's coming along asking for some resource, wanting to do something in your network, is, you don't want to assume anything, but we're going to just verify. We're going to verify. Um, the next section, or the next pillar, is to apply least privilege access. So the way to kind of understand this is basically it's whitelist only is what it really boils down to. Like things that aren't explicitly verified, then they're just cut out, or they have like a minimal access. You know, maybe they have to be connected to the internet, so you know their antivirus software can stay up to date, or you know they got to verify the time servers and things like that. But like everything that's not explicitly needed, you basically say we're not going to allow access. You know, it's basically a white list only. So that's what least privileged access means. And if you think about it, it's different than I mean, I'm just going to be honest. Like several times we've taken over the IT and security for a company that someone else was running, and we'll go in and the firewall won't be configured at all. And, you know, it'll basically just be running in what's called NAT mode. NAT mode, you know, officially blocks stuff from the outside, and then allows anything from the inside to go out, basically. And the mentality shift here is that we don't do that, but instead, let's lock everything down in and out, and then only allow the specific, maybe there's specific ports the whole business needs. Maybe there's one computer that needs a specific port. So you just allow what is needed. That's the basic concept of it.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that ultimately, when you're in a company and you have basically your IT department, many times you have to realize that sometimes restricting things makes it so problems can't happen. If you can't make an error, if you can't allow yourself to let data get taken out of your company or allow people to come in, you're going to be more secure than someone that has it all open and all basically all the keys to the castle just available for everyone. So I think it's really important that we move in this direction. This is a model that even the president of the United States is wanting to push. He's talked about zero trust in executive order. And it's basically saying you can't just allow people to do whatever they want anymore. You have to block everything. You need to just allow the things that will work for them, allow you to do your job.
Yeah, you make a really good point there, because you know, just last week I was doing a presentation for a potential client, and for some reason I couldn't do the projector, wouldn't work. I had it on my computer in PowerPoint. The projector wouldn't work. And so I tried to download it onto a USB drive to put it on one of the local computers in the office, which, by the way, this was kind of embarrassing, right? Because I'm the IT guy, but we have our data set up where it can't be downloaded onto a USB drive because we are only allowing our data to be used in explicitly defined ways. So you're going to run into that. Now, I will add also that like a basic building block or a basic rule of security is that business comes first. And so I know as soon as we start talking about limiting access and this and that, I know that the CEOs out there that are tuning in, they're bristling and they're like, no, you can't do that. We've got to do business. And I'll just add that a good cybersecurity expert is going to understand business has to come first. That's literally what's taught in security training. Business comes first, and then we have to work around that the best that we can so we don't interrupt the business. But you make a great point. We're going to have to change how we're doing things. And if we don't, we won't be secure. So there is going to be a little level of discomfort, but we're just going to have to get over it and kind of push through. And us as professionals, we have to make sure that the work interruption's minimal. Would you agree?
Oh, I 100% agree. And that kind of leads us into what can interrupt our work.
You know, this next one, always assume breach. So we probably get accused, or at least people think about it. They think that we're just running around saying the sky is falling, right? Because we're talking about cybercrime being way up, and we're having to be proactive. We've had to change how we do business because cybercrime is up so bad. But one of the main pillars, and this sounds like this, but one of the main pillars of zero trust is that you always assume breach. And what does that mean? That means that you set up your data, you set up your network, you set up everything where you're basically assuming that a bad actor is in there. So you set up your workstations that if there's a bad actor in there, they're going to have a jillion hurdles that they're not going to be able to get through, or that will be the goal. You set up your 365 data or your G Suite data, you set it up so you're basically assuming that there's going to be a breach, and you set up your workstations. I know we had a big talk about this. You and I did yesterday about setting up your workstations where theoretically it wouldn't matter if you were at a coffee shop or in your office behind a firewall, because you're basically assuming that the bad actors are there. So you're setting everything up, basically acting like they are there. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that the way with security and how I want to treat my clients is always treat their endpoints like they're in a hostile network. It is wherever they are, even at their office, at their home, anywhere, that is where they're all going to be unsafe. And we have to build firewall security around that so that if they have to suddenly go work from home, that they're ready to do that. I mean, we have to have advanced firewalls to make that happen on the endpoint itself, instead of, these big firewalls somewhere in the big corporate server room. So with that, I mean, ultimately, if you're always assuming something bad could happen, you're going to have the best level of security. I think it's really important. A part of this also is running fire drills on this stuff. Mm-hmm. Test your firewalls, test your stuff. Make sure that if a breach happens, that you're going to be prepared. Try to breach your own stuff. I mean, it's all important to this whole model.
And I will add that for some people, this is a literal mind shift. And if you're a security professional and you're more trusting by nature, I mean, my personal default is I start with trust with people, and and then they can ruin that. You know what I mean? Some people are they're zero trust with their relationships until you prove it, right? But if that's you, you've got to go into this with potentially a different mindset, where you get a notification. So we have all of our stuff set up to give us notifications. We have insight into so much. We get a notification, you got to go in there with your ears perked up and your radar on, and you got to be assuming that there is somebody in the network, even if it turns out that there's not. You don't want to just go, oh, that's the 12th notification that we got this week, no big deal. You have to have a with your attitude, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is you're going to have a zero trust attitude towards everything in as far as security is concerned.
So another thing, just kind of to remember, I mean, back in the day, and some people still do it. Do you remember how you would go into My Network Places and find all those computers that you would locally network and share files with one another?
Yeah.
Well, one of the reasons why we need to have zero trust, if you get hacked, what if that virus spreads out to all these computers that now you can communicate back and forth with?
Right.
So with zero trust, you need to eliminate those connections, only connect to the things that you're supposed to, which is usually a server or the cloud or whatever applications you need to get to. So LAN parties, the day of LAN parties are over, including sharing files. So zero trust just is the direction of the future.
Right. Yeah. And that's a really good point. And you want, if you need to assume that eventually you're going to be attacked. Eventually you're going to this is for real, that you'll have someone in your network. And so the time when that happens, you want to be able to isolate the particular workstation that happens on, and you don't want them just free reigning, jumping from workstation to workstation. So this
Well,
next,
yeah.
go ahead.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about some of the concepts of zero trust, but what do you actually need to protect? What needs to be inside this model? And I think the first thing that we all are thinking about is our data. So our data is precious. We are wanting to keep that stuff secure. We do not want to be ransomed. We don't want it to be on the dark web. We are wanting to protect our data. We need to make sure our data, that no one can access our data except the people that we explicitly allow, and that we make it difficult for our data to leave our country. Our country, our company.
And
You
country.
talked a little bit about that. Yeah, that too, really. You talked a little bit about putting in a flash drive. So that's one example that someone might be able to come to your computer, plug in a flash drive, and take data off. We need to make sure that people can't do that. Employees can't take that home, and someone gets mixed up a flash drive or something like that. We have to protect our data. We have to encrypt our data, and we need to make sure that there is nothing connected to our data except the things we explicitly allow.
Couple of points here, or a couple comments. One, so the data that needs to be protected, this is an important question that the stakeholders of a company, that might be like the sole owner, it might be the board, it might be the C-level people, but those people need to have a consultation with their cybersecurity professional, and they need to determine what data needs to be protected. That's a huge, important conversation that has to happen, along with determining like how long can you afford to be down? What does it cost to be down? What does it cost per hour, per day? Like, you've got to figure, that's part of basically figuring out your risk. And this whole idea of determining what data has to be protected is huge, important. And then also, I just wanted to point out, notice that we're talking about what specifically do we need to protect, as opposed to what I mentioned a little while ago, having an attack surface and trying to reduce it. Like, that's classic, like IT, classic security. We still think about that. We still consider that. But now what we're talking about is the surface, the protect surface, what we want to protect. So the data is huge, important. And then the next one is your applications. Your applications that need to be protected. So it's from a standpoint of, not like you're like putting your arms around your applications and protecting them, but you're going to determine what applications do I need. And then we're going to like not have other applications. So if somebody wants to download some tool, or they want to install this or that, they would have to get permission for it. They wouldn't just be allowed to do that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that businesses should have an application policy. They should be, when you get into an organization, you need to figure out what computer programs you need to be able to do your job effectively, and stop letting your employees decide which ones they want to use. Some of these programs may not be patched well. They may not be, they may have security risks. They may be from parties that put in viruses that can infiltrate your machine. So it's really important that you have as you said, kind of a white list of applications and programs that you allow in your company. And I think good policies put that into place.
Yeah. And I think it was yesterday, I don't know, this has been a crazy week. Came off of vacation last week, but I'm pretty sure just yesterday I read that a large percentage, it was more than half of all remote workers, they admit to like just basically closing their eyes and putting on blinders and like installing something they know they shouldn't, clicking on an email they know they shouldn't. You know, they're not thinking bad thoughts and they're not trying to bring down the whole company, but they're literally just kind of like going, la, 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 I'm going to install this little tool. Or la, 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 I'm going to go ahead and click on this email because it's catching my attention. So anyway, you know, that kind of on a tangent there, but this whole idea of just basically whitelisting your applications. The next section that we need to consider are assets. So assets have to do with your like your computers, your thermostats, your different things like that in the network. But this once again needs to be defined, and it needs to be whitelisted. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think that a lot of company owners understand inventory. You need to have an inventory on the machines that you have. You need to make sure that it is actually your machine, your company machine that's connected to this data. I think the idea of, being able to log into company data from every machine is something that's not part of the zero trust model. You need to identify the actual machine that's a trusted machine once you access that data. So it's not some person it's another layer. It's not some person in India that's connected to some sort of VPN in the United States. They're pretending to be you on their own machine. Identify the machine and make sure this machine is approved. There's a lot of tools that make that happen. I know Azure is one of the ones that we use to create this zero trust model for that. So, but yes.
And then also, if you are doing that, you can basically then just limit it to a certain amount of devices. And then going back kind of to number one, one of the things I like about 365 is they treat the data like it's in a breached situation. So the data is encrypted and walled off. I wouldn't just go around all willy-nilly like that, but I know, like, if you have Intune and you have it set up that your data is kept separate, like on a BYOD device. That's bring your own device, because a lot of companies allow that. And so like on a phone, which would be a BYOD device, the company doesn't own it, but 365 with Intune set up keeps that data separate. You can't even copy and paste from something, like you can't copy a paragraph in an email and then go paste it outside of a Microsoft product. Bottom line is, this one here, number 3, kind of gets into potentially a gray area if you have BYOD, bring your own device policies at your work. But then what you have to do is you have to make allowances for that. And even then, you really are doing whitelist, because you're saying, okay, we need to allow BYOD, but then we're going to have our employees are going to have a certain software stack on these devices. We have our Intune set up with 365, so we can control the data. If they leave the company, you just get on the dashboard, you can delete everything off, not everything, but you can delete all the Microsoft products and all their data off of those devices. So it's nice and clean. But once again, it's whitelisting. You're not just saying any old computer or phone in the entire world can log in. We would have to verify who the person was. And then, boom. So good points.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely. You should be with your company creating a bring your own device policy that has the zero trust architecture in it. So I think that that's really important.
Awesome. So our next section, what is this? What is services?
Well, services are going to be things. Why don't you get it?
Yeah. Sorry about that. I had it pop up on my screen. I think someone tried to chat us and it didn't come through. So what we're talking about here are things like your DHCP, your DNS, services that you're going to allow between your on your computers, between your things on the network. But bottom line, just whitelisting it and then making sure that what's going on is exactly what you wanted.
Correct. I think that there you have enough. Yeah, we talked about the network. This is your firewall and how those are all set up. Those are all different services. It could be your servers. All of that stuff can be things that you need to put in the zero trust architecture.
We talked about you actually brought it up last week, talking about when you're at a coffee shop, some people use a hotspot, some people use a VPN. So like a VPN, like that's definitely, a service that needs to be controlled. And, if you're going to allow it, needs to be locked down. And, you don't want just anybody in your company connecting to the VPN, unless they have a specific need. That's just one example, of just changing the mentality of, okay, everything's off the table. And what do we have to bring back as far as services? What do we bring back as far as assets? What do we bring back as far as applications? Bottom line, just like limiting that protect service to exactly what needs to be protected, and then just not allowing the rest of it to happen as much as possible.
I agree. So how can, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
How can you get started? So I think the first thing that you need to think about is, what are your risks of your organization? How much risk do you have? Have a cybersecurity risk review with your IT provider, or ask one of us to help you with it. We'd be happy to do that. I think that once you identify your risk, then we need to see what we can do to protect it. We need to put your company in a zero trust model. I think that ultimately it is a big process to change things into a whitelist only on your organization. But what we're finding is that is the most safe way to move forward on this stuff.
Right. The things that always pop up about this, how can I get started? I think the next question that always pops up is, how difficult is it? So how difficult is it to get started?
Well, honestly, the first thing you need to do, it's not very difficult. You just have to have someone that knows how to do it. So that's the hard thing. Doing it on your own is tough. Trying to go to your employees and say, you can't do this, you can't do that, and trying to make those decisions can be tough without a lot of training in this area. So I think finding a professional that can help you allows it to be a smooth, easy process. Many of these professionals, they already know what things are secure and what things are not. So they're going to be able to adapt your company into this model.
Right. Yeah. Good answer. The other thing that I hear is it expensive, or what's it going to cost? Is it going to cost me a lot? I guess a better way to look at that is it going to, that when people are concerned about this, they say, is it going to cost me a lot to implement this? So is this expensive, or is it going to cost a lot to do it? What are your thoughts on that? What's your answer for that one?
I think that it all just depends on your risk. Ultimately, I think how large your organization is can make it either cheap or more expensive. I think the more employees you have, the higher risk you have. So therefore, these are things you got to take into consideration. I don't think that the zero trust model is inexpensive, but when you think about the risk, honestly, it can seem very cheap. When you lose all your data, if your data goes to the dark web, if you get breached, ransomware, any of that, I mean, these costs are minimal. So I think you should be looking at probably with 1 to 3% of your revenue probably needs to be spent on IT. So, and that's kind of a full thing for putting you in this model.
Yeah, exactly. I read a survey recently, not necessarily a survey, but basically a market where they went through the market, did research, and they were saying in this research, they were saying that going forward, businesses should expect to spend. They said a minimum of about 3,000 per employee per year, so 200 plus 250, and that was on top of your existing IT that you're already spending for your IT. So that wouldn't include like your hardware and things like that. Um, you know, that could sound like and may be a big expense, but bottom line is it's got to happen. So you make it happen and you just go out and you make a couple extra sales to pay for it. You know what I mean? Or you got to pass it down to your customers or whatever that is, but you got to make it happen. And then you just have to figure out how to pay for it. You know what I mean? Because the bottom line is if you don't, you could end up losing your business, and you don't want to lose your business, because you had a cybersecurity attack or, cybercrime attack or whatever. So in light of all of that, my answer is it's kind of expensive. I mean, it's not super cheap. You really can't do things like that anymore, but there's things that are more expensive. And I mean, you're going to pay more for healthcare for your workers a lot of times, So anyway, I just think it's something that you got to bite the bullet. You got to do it and then go out and make another sale to pay for it, or 2 sales or 10 or whatever it is. You figure out a way to pay for it and figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah. I think the real thing is just in this day in the world, honestly, these things are becoming more and more required. Your insurance company is going to require this stuff pretty soon. The government is putting out regulations for this stuff. I think ultimately is just something that you should be reviewing in your organization and considering how you can be secure. I think that if you have a lot of PII or PHI, you are going to be at more risk with your data going out, maybe company secrets, things like that. So think about those things. If that applies to you or you're in the financial industry, then you need to think about your data. So
PII being personally identifiable, PHI, personal health information, right?
Yes. So this is going to mean doctors have a lot of the PHI, or sometimes the government, local government, things like that, fire departments. A lot of times that data is just on someone's computer and
right
in some Word document or Excel document. And these are just, anyway, it's important to analyze the situation when you have that type of risk.
Yeah. And, I know we're about to wrap it up, but fun fact, Texas passed a law this year. So, like people that are in the medical field, they have laws called HIPAA, which are related to them. And they are required to report a breach. And there's actually, you can Google it. It's called the HIPAA. Well, it's not literally called that, but everybody calls it the HIPAA wall of shame. You can actually Google that and you can see people where there have been breaches in their companies. But fun fact, Texas passed a law. If you have any kind of PII, PHI, and you get breached, you're going to be forced to report it. And it's going to go on a Texas PII wall of shame. And your name's going to be up there for a year. So the point of the law is to incentivize a little kick in the butt for businesses to get up off their butts and start to implement some of this cybersecurity stuff that you and I like lose sleep over at night because people won't do it. But bottom line is we have to do it. It's a national security issue. It could potentially cost your business. And now there's laws in, at least I know in my state, that if anybody has a breach, it's going to get reported and it's going to go up on the Texas wall of shame, or, or whatever they're going to call it. Probably it will be called that. But bottom line is, it's got to happen, right?
Yep, Oregon's the same way on their, reporting requirements for a breach. It's by law, and we have a HIPAA wall of shame for people that didn't, or I
Hmm.
should say, the people that got breached. So
Hmm.
it's definitely a big consideration. I'm sure that everyone in the news has seen how cybersecurity has grown, and I think that Randy and I are just here to say, hey, we've got answers and some solutions for you, and we'd love to help educate you and talk about your risk.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that's a good point to end on. We are here to help, and we don't make money off of this podcast or whatever you want to call it. So the way you can help us out is by liking it and sharing it and letting other people know about it. So want to appreciate everybody tuning in today. If you have questions or comments and you want to know some, maybe you have a question about some of the content that we mentioned today, you can just get on wherever you're watching this, leave it in the comments. We should get notified and we can come back and answer those for you. So any parting words, and you want to go ahead and take us on out of here?
Just thank you guys all for coming, and we'll see some of you next week for part 3 of securing remote workers from home.